Not everybody believes that sugar is bad for you yet. We're working on it. I will say that the tide is turning. We actually have data that says that people are starting to get the message.
Can you talk to us about sugar substitutes in general and the health implications of their consumption as you see it?
Sure. So everybody wants diet sweeteners to be the answer. Unfortunately, they're not. So it is true that diet sweeteners don't have calories. And if calories were the reason for cutting back on sugar, then diet sweeteners might make sense. But it's not about calories. I've just told you it's not about calories. It's about the molecule itself. You say, but there's no fructose in those diet sweeteners. They should be fine. Well, they have their own problems. So epidemiological studies show that the toxicity of one Coca-Cola equals the toxicity of 2 diet Coca-Colas. So half as bad. But half as bad does not mean good, right? All right. So it would be better if you did nothing, neither of those. But the fact is, they're half as bad. Now, why are they half as bad if they don't have any calories? Again, it has nothing to do with calories. Number one, you put something sweet on the tongue. Message goes, tongue to brain, sugar's coming, brain goes, sugar's coming, sends a message via the pancreas to release insulin, even though it's not sugar. So you get the insulin response anyway, and it turns out that insulin response is the thing that drives the chronic metabolic disease. Not the glucose, but the insulin. And so even though you get it, because you get an insulin response, it's still a problem. In addition, those various diet sweeteners have other effects on the intestine. The group from Weizmann Institute, Elenov's group, Aaron Siegel and Elenov, have shown that it causes leaky gut and glucose intolerance anyway. And now we have lots of data that show that, for instance, erythritol has been associated with cardiovascular disease, and aspartame, as you said, has been shown to be probably carcinogenic by the WHO. So it's not a good second answer. We ultimately do need a good second answer, and people are working on that. But diet sweeteners turn out to not be the panacea that we thought they were.
Now, you're probably one of the greatest proponents of eating real food as opposed to man-made food that there is out there. Why do you think the message about ultra-processed foods and in relation to sugar still isn't being put into action? Because the information is out there, it's widely available, and it has been thanks to people like yourself.
Well, I would say that there are 2 main reasons. One, the food industry. This is their juggernaut, and they're not giving it up easy, okay? And so they're plowing millions and millions and billions of dollars into marketing to basically make people think that their food is fine. And the other is denial. People don't want this to be true. I understand it's an inconvenient truth. They didn't want climate change to be true either. And look what happened. The fact of the matter is, this is a public health crisis, and we have to treat it as such. People think, oh, I can determine on my own what it is that I put in my mouth, individual, personal responsibility. Okay. That doesn't work for a public health crisis. There are a lot of things that we said were personal responsibility issues, like tuberculosis, like COVID, like, teen pregnancy, like HIV, which turned out to be public health crises. Every personal responsibility issue is really a public health crisis, and you have to treat it as such. You can't just leave it to, the masses to make their own decisions, because when you do, things blow up out of control. You ultimately need individual intervention, which, in the case of sugar would be called rehab. And you also need societal intervention, which, for lack of a better word, we can call laws. For every other toxic and addictive substance, we've had rehab and laws. For nicotine, for alcohol, we've had rehab and laws. Unfortunately, we're going to end up having to need the same thing for sure.
Well, I know you explore the whole impact, the negative influence that corporate America has on people's minds in your book, The Hacking of the American Mind. And it was interesting. I was watching the Women's Soccer World Cup before I engaged with you in this interview, and I noticed one of the sponsors was Coca-Cola.
Always.
So their effects, it seemed to be, well, not insidious, because insidious would suggest that it's happening very subtly. They're very open, they're very vocal about their sponsoring all of the seemingly sporting events, but it really brings home just how vocal, how obvious they are, and how widely accepted these huge conglomerates are across the world, despite the negative effects that their products have.
Well, not everybody believes that sugar is bad for you yet. We're working on it. I will say that the tide is turning. We actually have data that says that people are starting to get the message. For instance, there is a public relations arm of the food industry called IFIC, the International Food Information Council. And in 2011, every year they do a yearly report, and every year they ask the public a question. And in 2011, they asked the public, what is the foodstuff that causes the most weight gain, causes obesity? And at that time, only 11% of the population said refined carbohydrate and sugar. Okay, 42% said a calorie is a calorie, or I don't know. In 2018, they asked that exact same question the exact same way. And now it was exactly reversed. And now 42% said refined carbohydrate and sugar, and only 11% said a calorie is a calorie, or I don't know. So we are teaching the public. There's no question the public's being educated. But as you can imagine, this is an aircraft carrier, and it takes a long time to turn it around.
So in your mind then, if we can set the record straight, then when you say real food, what should people take from that as far as what they believe should be the major component of their diet?
It's very simple, Matthew. If it has a label, it's a warning label. Okay? Real food doesn't have a label. If a food has a label, it's been processed in some fashion. Now, there are different levels of processing. That's true. My colleague, Dr. Carlos Montero at the University of Sao Paulo, and his colleagues developed this thing called the NOVA system for classification of food processing. So all foods are NOVA class 1 through NOVA class 4. So let's give you an example. Let's take an apple. So NOVA class 1 would be an apple picked off the tree. NOVA class 2 would be apple slices, destemmed, deseeded, possibly deskinned. NOVA class 3 would be apple sauce, macerated, possibly with sugar added. NOVA class 4 would be a McDonald's apple pie. Now, it's been shown that only that NOVA class 4 designation is associated with chronic metabolic disease. So NOVA classes 1 through 3 are actually probably okay, no problem. It's only that NOVA class 4. But it just so happens that 73% of the food consumed in America and the UK is in that NOVA class 4. And that's what's killing you. So how do you stay away from that? Well, a good way to do it is stay away from anything with a label.
A simple rule of thumb that I read that you had espoused before was that if you're in your local store, local supermarket, and you look at the ingredients of an item or a product that you want to purchase, if sugar appears in the first 3 ingredients, you have said, well, basically that product is a dessert.
That's correct. So, people need to understand, that Chinese chicken salad is dessert. And, they don't think of it that way, but that's the way they need to think about it. And the food, the sugar's been added to virtually everything because it increases palatability, of course, which translates to increasing sales. So the food industry adds the sugar for their purposes, not for yours. In addition, people say, oh, yeah, but sugar can't be addictive. Oh, yes, it can, and I can prove it. There's an economic arbiter of addiction. It's called price elasticity. Now, have you ever heard of price elasticity, Matthew?
I studied economics a few years ago, yes.
Very good. So the for your audience, so price elasticity is how will consumption change when the price of any given item goes up 1%? Okay, so if a food item is price elastic, when the price goes up 1%, then the consumption will go down close to 1%. So the most price elastic item in our supermarket is eggs. Okay, they have a price elasticity index of 0.32, which means that if the price of eggs go up 1%, consumption of eggs go down 0.68%. Okay, so that's how it works. Price inelastic foods mean that when the price goes up, consumption doesn't change. It stays high. So what are the most price inelastic foods? Fast food, soda, juice. So when the price of those go up, you keep buying them. And the reason is because you need your fix.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, check out this video here, which tells you how to get rid of that stubborn belly fat.